Welcome to Teaching Truth. It was a little over 34 years ago when the quite respectable town of Lockerbie, 20 miles north of the Anglo-Scottish border, was unexpectedly thrust onto the world stage. Thrust onto the world stage after the Scottish and Oceanic Air Traffic Control Centre at Prestwick lost contact with Pan Am Flight 103, which was en route from Heathrow to New York. What happened next was an unspeakable tragedy, an atrocious terrorist attack, which resulted in the aircraft disintegrating, the cockpit coming to land on Tundergarth Hill, and the fuselage crashing in a fireball on Sherwood Crescent. So why do I begin our reflections today, and indeed this week, by taking you to Lockerbie? Well, I take you to Lockerbie because it was an unforgettable night. An unforgettable night when a fire caught the attention of everyone in the lowlands of Scotland. But come with me not to the lowlands of Scotland, but to the far side of the desert of Midian, to discover a fire which caught the attention of but one man. That one man to whom I'm referring is, of course, Moses, that great Old Testament character who we are journeying with over these days, weeks, and months from the cradle to the grave. And this week in our reflections, we journey with and come with Moses to the burning bush. That burning bush which we read of in Exodus chapter 3, and that burning bush which was to provide the place where Moses was going to encounter God in a remarkable way. If you have your Bible, I invite you to turn to it, to Exodus chapter 3, where, just to set the scene, we're going to read a few verses together. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why this bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. An unforgettable night in Lockerbie. An unforgettable day in the far side of the desert. That day Moses, as the sun rose, would have got up, and as he did every other day, would have tended the sheep of Jethro, his father-in-law. Moses had become a shepherd. That was his job, and for the best part of the last 40 years, Moses had been guiding the sheep and tending the sheep. But on this particular day, Moses led the flock, Moses led the sheep to the far side, or to the backside of the desert, to Mount Horeb. Now, Mount Horeb is significant because Mount Horeb was where God was going to meet with Moses. This was a day on which Moses was going to encounter God and experience God in a way he had not done so before. A day, and it's no understatement to say this, that literally changed not only for Moses, but for the whole nation, and in terms of biblical history, changed the course of history. You see, instead of encountering sheep as Moses had done every other day, on this day, Moses was going to encounter the sovereign. He was going to know not monotony, but majesty. The shepherd of Midian was about to be called and commissioned to be the leader of a nation. And yet God had to take Moses, as we thought about last week, to Midian. He had to flee, he had to run for his life, and God had him where he wanted him. And I believe that God led Moses to the far side of the desert because that is where God wanted to encounter Moses. Moses came to an isolated spot, an insignificant spot in the desert, involving an insignificant bush. And yet through this insignificant bush, the significant God was going to place a significant call upon the life of Moses. It was an ordinary bush, and yet a bush that God was going to use. A bush that was not consumed by fire. Moses was called by God to come over and to see the bush. He went to look at it. This was a strange sight. I mean, after all, you wouldn't see bushes necessarily on fire in the desert and not going out. And that turning aside, that going over on the part of Moses would involve leaving his normal duties, his shepherd duties, for a short time. A bit like the shepherds who went to see Jesus when he was born, left their duties. So this shepherd, in an altogether different field, left his duties to go and encounter God. Now let me just invite your consideration around this thought today. Has God perhaps taken you to the far side of an altogether different desert that he might meet with you? Do you feel as if you have been fleeing from God? Do you feel as if for a long time you've been in a desert experience? And do you feel that today God has perhaps nudged you towards someone, or even to listen to this thought that he might have an encounter with you? God has a way of moving us and directing us through circumstances and using ordinary events, ordinary places and ordinary things in order that he might reveal himself to us as he did to Moses. If you are in the far side of the desert today, perhaps God, as it was with Moses, perhaps God has got you exactly where he wants you so that he might have that encounter with you.